all, I think it's really important to understand that feeling lonely is perfectly normal. It's feeling hungry, you eat; feeling thirsty, you drink; feeling lonely, you go to find company.
My name is Maisie Edwin, and over the past couple of months, I've been looking into the loneliness epidemic and its profound impact on adults. Despite people aged between 16 to 29 being more than 2 times as likely to report feeling lonely compared to those over 70, the loneliness epidemic has long been associated with the elderly. The conversations surrounding loneliness are dominated with examples of older adults past retirement age who feel cut off from technology and younger generations. However, the emerging trend over the last couple of years indicates that rates of loneliness are increasing rapidly among 18 to 30-year-olds, followed closely by 30 to 50-year-olds. I'm calling this group the silent majority, as throughout all of my interviews and research into the topic, one thing has remained a constant: their reluctance to open up about feeling lonely. To explore this topic further, I contacted people with first-hand experiences of loneliness. Anne Osborne, CEO of the Rural Coffee Caravan charity, which visits areas across rural Suffolk and provides resources as well as community events and initiatives. Stafford Thomas, a pub landlord of the Turk's Head in Twickenham, which has fostered its own community and runs events every day of the week. And Stanley Wheeler-Kemp, a manager at the pub for several years who has built connections to people throughout his work behind the bar, as well as Nicole Ross, a young woman who moved to London from her home in Scotland to follow her dreams of becoming a filmmaker, who now finds herself isolated, hundreds of miles away from home and feeling the impact of it every day.
Older people expect it. Older people kind of expect to feel lonely. They might have lost their partner. It's much harder for younger people to admit that they feel lonely. And actually, I think the loneliest age now, not an age we see very much of, but the loneliest age now is something like 18 to 30. Going off to university, until you find your tribe, it can be an extremely lonely experience. You could be in a room full of people and you don't actually know any of them. And if you're not an outgoing sort of person and you haven't immediately resonated with anybody, you could feel extremely lonely in that environment.
I don't know. I think there's almost, and this is going to sound weird, I think there's almost an expectation. When you're older, people die, you've lived your life, your friends have died off, you almost expect it yourself. You almost expect to be lonely. Well, of course I'm lonely. 3 of my friends have died in the last year, Whereas when you're younger, it's almost like there's a pressure to not be lonely because, the world's your oyster. You can do anything you want.
You're not expected to be lonely. And because if you do feel lonely, it feels like no one else is lonely. And I think my own personal experience of being lonely was not being lonely because I didn't have anyone, and not being lonely because I didn't have an amazing set of friends.
Like working in Chelsea, and there was not a community there at all, I don't think, at least. People around Chelsea work a lot more. That's how they can afford to live in Chelsea. And then I think when they were coming into the pub, it was more to get away from that, but with their family, less so to see other people. 15 years? I haven't lived with my family since I was 10, 11, 12. I can't remember, probably 11, I think. I went to boarding school.
Working in pubs, I've seen a guy who was living over here, but his wife was back in Germany, and his wife had just given birth, and he didn't know what to do, and he was sat in the pub alone, and he had about 5 Guinnesses, and he was just on his phone alone. And I was like, "Oh, hey mate, what's the occasion?" And he goes, "Well, my wife's just given birth back in Germany, and I felt like I should do something, so I came to the pub alone." And he was like, "You're the first person apart from my family that I've told."
I think people nowadays, if you work a 9 to 5 or you work from home, you could go days without speaking to someone. You could order everything, all your food online, you can order anything that you want online, and it just gets dropped off at your door, and you don't have that connection with people.
I think life's tough and people have a guard up most of the time now, and asking someone how they are drops your guard a little bit if you actually mean it.
We need to be connected. There's a wonderful poem, go away and read this poem by Benjamin Zephaniah, and it's just called People Need People.